And good afternoon. Welcome to the Andy Rogers podcast. And today's guest we've got my good friend Aidan Martin. How you doing, mate?
How's it going, Andy? Nice to be here, man.
I know we've knew each other for a while and that.
10 years now.
I know. Is it 10 years?
Well, we started college together.
Yeah,
10 years ago we met.
Oh, mate, that's mental. Jesus, you've done me there.
I know. Crazy. Time just flies, man.
Right enough, I was like, 17, 18. And I'm 28 in a month today, so just frightening.
So that's when like my education journey started 10 years ago, and I'm still learning now. I'm still in education.
I know. We'll definitely go into some of that, man. So we know what to start is growing up in Ladyville and all that. How you found it, and you lived a couple of streets up from where I grew up, just at separate times. How did you find it?
It was a mixture, right? Because obviously in my book I talk about some of the more brutal experiences of being a young lad growing up in a very working class area that's part of our new town, Livingston. And at that time I was born in 1986, so it's still very new and it's still developing. So the good sides of growing up in Ladyville was there was a real sense of community. People knew each other's first name. People looked out for each other. Loved playing outside with all my pals, playing football in the middle of the street. Some of the older lads would get they would take fences off people's gardens and build football goals out of them. And that showed you how self-sufficient even young boys were back then, because they all had hammers and nails and they were building goals and putting a net on it, and we'd have football competitions, and we would only stop when the ice cream van, the icy, came by, and we'd get our glass bottles of Iron Brew and our flakes and our ice cream and our sweets, and all that stuff was great. The camaraderie, playing Chatlow Runaway and building gang huts, and being that generation of kids that still played outside. That stuff was amazing. What became problematic for me was the older I got, the more territorial and violent that it got, and it wasn't a rich area. A lot of people didn't have a lot. My mum worked 3 jobs. My gran and granddad helped out a lot, and my granny worked in Patterson's biscuit factory. My granddad was a taxi driver. My mum worked in all the pubs and that, like the Ferns and the Lizzie Bryce, and so we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't know my biological father, so there was a lot of difficulties growing up in Ladyville. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of violence, a lot of masking how I felt, feeling anxious all the time. So there was pros and cons.
Was the young teams about when you were younger?
We had LYT was the Ladyville one, and I wasn't really part of a young team per se, but I had my group of friends, and we were I describe my group of friends as being the in-betweeners. We weren't part of the hard crew, and we weren't part of the so-called geeks. We were just somewhere in the middle. We didn't really fit in anywhere. And the high school at that time for me was just an absolute riot. It was just about survival. It was not about education. And looking back, some of the stuff that went on in that school was just unbelievable. People wouldn't put their kids in a school like that today.
I mean, when I went for Broxbourne, Envy, I was shitting myself. I was proper, expecting, scrapping as soon as I went in, and I think in the first week I was in a scrap, because it's dog eat dog, isn't it?
It was, and it was all we knew, though. I think everyone that grew up in that kind of generation that you come from, I know you're a bit younger than me, but you still weren't that far behind, and we grew up in this generation where you had to hit first, you had to strike first, and any signs of weakness would get pounced upon, and that school was just rife for
it. When did you leave Inverarman?
2002. Yeah.
It was the year before I went up. The year before I went.
Yeah. So I was. Yeah, I was 16. When left with no qualifications, no career path, no hope.
Yeah. What did that end up leading into? Just having no hope.
You know, by the time I left high school, I was living in Elyburn with my parents, which
Yeah.
some people might class as a more middle class area. That's the way I looked at it. It was big houses, big streets. The neighbours all had careers, nice cars. There was still trouble and fights, but it wasn't to the same level of violence that was happening when I grew up in Ladywell.
Yeah.
And so I went straight into. I'd been a paper boy, and I got a job at the shop where I'd been a paper boy. But it was like the money was, you couldn't live on that money. I was earning about £300 or £400 a month, working like full-time hours, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, going along. I mean, you're 16 and you've got no qualifications, so you're at the bottom of the food chain as far as money and opportunity, and whatever money I had was going straight on to drink and drugs, and it was the beginning of some really violent, brutal years.
Yeah. So going on, the drug and that, how did you end up, going into the drinking drugs? Because we've all got different ways we end up going into it.
It was already happening for me when I was in school. Alcohol first. There was I won't say the person's name, but there was a person at my school who got straight whiskey and vodka, half bottles, and we'd bring them to drama class. So we'd be in drama class buying them for a tenner. And so my paper round money and pocket money was used to buy this. And there would be times when we couldn't get it off him. So we'd hang around outside, I think it was called the Indian Cottage in Ladywell. And we would ask. No, just up from St John's Hospital. It's not there anymore.
Oh, yeah, I know where you are. Yeah,
I think that's what it was called. And so me and my mate Dev would stand there and we would ask older people to go in and get us MD 2020 or Bucky or Merrydown Cider, White Lightning. And so it was just straight into that, Andy. It was like I was already doing that in school, and then leaving school was just a case of moving up, and then it was like smoking weed, which I never liked, but it was like another part of moving up the food chain as far as substances, and before long it was like speed and eckies and cocaine.
Yeah. Did you go into I know you go into it in your book, but I didn't want to give too much away about your book, because people need to go out and buy that and story. I'm not getting too much of that. Did you go to going out and that? Did it start off at house parties and then just escalate into going to the clubs?
Yeah, house parties was common, even again before becoming an adult at 18. House parties could be great, but it could also be really dangerous. You could go to one, or someone could turn up at one, and you had real problems with them. Yeah. Where I grew up, I even though when I moved away from Ladywell, by the time I was 16, I was then back living in New Ladywell. I was living in Deans with my pal, my cousin, and my brother, and it was a total drug using place we lived. We just had drugs all the time. So any house parties we had or house parties we went to could quite easily result in violence. And a lot of the time, the people I was in trouble with, there was bigger groups of them, there was more of them, they had weapons, they'd be willing to go further than what we would. And I knew how to handle myself, and I fought back, but I just didn't feel I was anywhere near as dangerous as some of these people I was getting in trouble with. So it just always was, it was full of fear, house parties, even though you're going for fun. It was always like looking over your shoulder, who's here, and the atmosphere could change in an instant if someone walked in and you're like, shit, I've got a problem with this guy.
If the wrong person walked into the party, you're like, oh, what's something to kick off the night? Have they been drinking? What have they been drinking and all
that? You could feel it in the air sometimes. Like it would just be an atmosphere that would just change, and you'd be like, "Fuck, shit's gonna go down there."
It's just it ends in. I mean, even growing up, you'd see it in the news, and you'd see it on back in the day it was Bebo and You know,
People.
this happened, this had
Yeah.
happened, and that had happened. How did you? Also, school was a survival. Was there anything you actually enjoyed in school? Any particular subject?
So ironically, I liked drama. That's where I got my alcohol. But I liked like acting, and
Mm.
I just liked everything about drama. And I liked English. I liked writing, but there just was never a chance to really learn. The classes were chaos. There was one of my English classes. I remember people opening the windows and throwing their chairs and their books and all that out the window. And we had a
Oh,
teacher that was there was a teacher that was stoned all the time, and everyone knew who she was, and it was just madness, man. I mean, you didn't learn in that. It was either you were part of the chaos and you were involved in it, or you were fighting with someone, or you were just shutting up and staying quiet at the back and watching it all play out, man. I mean, very rarely did I ever have a chance to learn and get nurtured. Nobody noticed in high school that I could write. You know what I mean?
No, you just because of everything that was going on, you just end up. School was just there's no point in the end, is there?
Yeah, it was like something to survive, and then as soon as you can leave, you leave.
I mean, it obviously has changed now. But I mean, it had that always had that reputation, and
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of went in, a couple of years later. It did feel like there was a bit of a change in the school. New head teacher, and you know,
I'm sure.
felt
I
like they
mean,
changed the.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure the school that it is. I mean, you're talking when I left. That's 18, 19 years ago. So it's not going to be the same school I experienced. But I'd heard that there was improvements made and all that afterwards. But it didn't do anything for people like me that went and had the experience I had and left. I mean, I still left with no qualifications in the future.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do for jobs in between, going from, high school ended up in college?
So for a long time, I worked just in that shop. And listen, there's no shame in having a job where you're working in a shop and stacking shelves. You're earning a living, and it's an honest living. But I didn't know I didn't know I could be anything else or do anything else, and I was on minimum wage, so I wasn't earning enough to even own a car. The money I had was just barely enough to get by, and luckily I was staying at my parents, so it wasn't a job where I could build a future. But I did end up working in debt collection after that. For debt collection organisations, it was all telephone based, and you're phoning people. And what was ironic was that by this point, I was taking so much cocaine that when I was going into the office, I was still so high that I was really good at the job because it took away the inhibitions or any anxiety. So I was really quite good at that job. And I ended up doing that and then working for Sky TV after that, which was a good organisation to work for. But my life was still quite chaotic. And then when the addiction really started taking everything away, and I'd gone through some serious trauma with my brother being very ill, I lost everything and went to Canada. I thought I was going to find myself. I had this image that I was going to go over there and I'd be in the mountains and I'd spiritually connect to the animals and the wildlife and find myself. But what I did was I just took myself over there and found more drugs and more chaos. But what I did do is it gave me a chance to volunteer in homeless hostels. And by this time when I was in Canada, I'd already discovered recovery meetings, which I'd been dipping in and out of, and I'd been getting a little bit of clean time here and there. And so when I was in Canada and I'd done the homeless hostels, I'd done the volunteering, it made me realise that I was getting a really good feeling from helping other people. And that was the first seed. The seed was planted then that maybe I'll look at going to college. And then I came back from Canada and got a place in the college, and that's where I first met yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been, some change going from, living over here, taking drugs and working, you are having those clean periods to going over, the other side of the world and, living over there, and there's a part of an epiphany happen for you. in the homeless work. And I know a couple of people have done work in homeless, in the sort of traded working in homeless areas. And I've been through homeless myself. And honestly, they're unbelievable people that work in, work in the sort of industry. I'm still friends with, luckily still quite friendly with one of the key workers that I had.
It was like I'd never done a job where the role was basically a selfless one where you were just given to other people. I'd worked for organisations where it was mostly about profit. I worked as a sales assistant, and it was selling things, and you work as a debt collector, and it's recovering money and debt. The homeless hostel was voluntary, so I wasn't getting paid to do it. And my role was a very basic one. I was in the kitchen, I was preparing foods, whether it be like peeling carrots and potatoes and making up sandwiches and pouring teas and coffees. And then I was serving it to people. And obviously there's different types of homelessness. I've been homeless, but not houseless. So I've been able to go and stay at someone's house when I was homeless. But these people were homeless in the sense that they were on the street. They were literally homeless and houseless. And some of them had been long-term traumatized, long-term addiction, involved in violence, or straight out of prison. So they'd seen the worst parts of society and been involved in it and been victimized by it. And when I was doing something as simple as handing a sandwich or a cup of coffee over, I was getting two things. I was getting this feeling inside of self-worth because I was doing something for someone else. I was also identifying with them because I was still very much a broken human being. And I looked in their eyes, and I recognised in them what they could see in me, and I think there was an identification there. We were on opposite sides of the counter. I was handing food to them, but we were both broken.
Yeah, you had a total kinship with them.
Totally, man.
Yeah, no, I get that. I sort of understand because for about 6 months of my life, I was living in a homeless shelter. Split up with my ex, and I had no other way to go, really, other than go through homeless and, go through all that. I was lucky I still had a job, pretty good paying, but getting a house now it's virtually impossible unless you've got money behind you, or mum and dad can help you or that. I was living miles away from home and went through that. I went through it for 6 months, and it changed my opinion on everything about, people who are homeless and people with drug abuse and all that. Because the things I've seen in that 6 months, I've never seen in my life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I made friends with a lot of them because I could identify with a lot of them myself. So much extreme drug abuse, but I could see being broken myself as something different. We could all sort of come together for periods of time, but people like yourself who would work in the homeless shelters, they're selfless people, and there's something about people that do that work that I find quite magical, personally.
I think a lot of people are drawn to that kind of work if you want to make a difference in some way.
So we'll get on to actual college. What dragged you into social care and all that?
Ironically, just off the back of what you're saying, what attracted me to it was that my mum worked in emergency homeless hostels for younger people, and she still does that now, actually. And her role at the time was to be a key worker with the young people who'd gone through a lot of different trauma and help prepare them for going back into society and having a tenancy. And my mum was just such a big inspiration to me because she's always been such a caring, selfless person and putting other people first. And it just made me think, what? As a using addict, I was living a very selfish lifestyle, and I wanted to do a course that was about helping other people. And when I volunteered in that homeless hostel, it just reaffirmed to me that my life's going to be wasted if I don't use it to try and help other people. So that was the initial attraction to that course at the college.
Yeah. I think I still use tools from that 1 year in
Me
college
too.
myself. Even just the way of talking to people. You'll be a bit like this yourself. You'll get a lot of your friends coming to you with, their own problems, and I always feel like I'm an ear. The way I've like now see it after going to bit of therapy myself is a problem shared's a problem half. You know what I mean? It's
I think
didn't realise
I've been in education in the last 10 years, I've been in education for 8 years out of the 10. And I still see that class we had as my favourite class of them all.
we were not something.
It was a good blend of people, man, and we all connected very, very quickly. And that connection lasted for the whole year. And it was it was an amazing, amazing class. And I've had some great classes after that too, but nothing ever quite felt as good as that.
It was the same. Like, I went to college in Dundee, I went to college in Edinburgh, and I've never had that core of people. I was pretty close to it in Edinburgh, but then I had personal problems. I had to get out of the crowd and just couldn't handle, things that were going on in there. I just need to focus on me. End up just attaching myself to one guy. But I'm not been back to college since sort of 2014. It is. And I've got my hire. I got my hire that year. And part of me, I'm in a sort of situation now where it's like, I go back to it, or we have to make a decision pretty soon.
Go for it, man. If you're drawn to going back to
it. So after the year we done, we got our level 4, level 5.
I don't even remember what the levels were called at the time. It was called an intermediate class, I think, or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I remember, the class basically split up into two. You went over to social sciences.
Yeah, I changed course because I was interested in why people ended up in a life of crime and why people ended up as an addict like myself. And the subjects in social sciences like criminology, psychology, sociology went deeper into that, and that's why I changed course for my hires.
Yeah. And through that, you've went on to uni. And what are you doing at uni?
Well, my first course at uni was social sciences, and I went straight from college into uni, social sciences, and when you get to the halfway point in uni, you have to narrow it down. So I was doing a lot of different modules. I was doing psychology, sociology, criminology, a bit of philosophy, a little bit of history, even economics. So there was little pockets of things you could learn. But my main focus was sociology, psychology, and criminology. When it gets to your final 2 years, you have to narrow that down. So I narrowed it down to sociology and criminology. And I graduated in 2017 with my honours in criminology and sociology. What I'm doing now is I'm past the halfway point of a master's degree in social work, which would have finished in March, but because of the virus pushing the placement back, it will probably be the middle of July now before I finish.
How much has the virus in general impacted all of that since last March? The education.
A lot, because my first placement was supposed to be for 70 working days, and it had to get stopped on day 37, and that was purely because the virus had just broke out, and we didn't know society didn't know what it was, how serious it was going to be. So that placement had to stop early, and a lot of the coursework I'd done was just rushed, and it was from home, and it was all new at that point. Then year 2 got pushed back a month or two. I should have started my second placement in September.
Yeah.
That got delayed until January, and then it got delayed again until what's looking like March now.
Yeah, it's mad how this virus has just completely shut everything down. You know,
Yeah, it's surreal.
I mean, I'm on my second period of furlough now. I
Really.
was off from March to August, and then August, I think it was August, and then I got put back on it a couple of weeks ago.
How are you feeling that?
See the first time I crumbled. I
Really?
completely crumbled. You know what I mean? And starting to have a routine, eating junk food. One thing I didn't do was drink, because like previous experience I've had a bit, you know, drinking too much, drinking all the time. Because I'd been through the baller before, I was like, right, don't drink, just don't. Just sort of told myself that's the way you're going to end up in a mess, and started like gradually just going out a bit, ended up just going for weekly walks and sort of small goal setting. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Small
Do you
little
find the
goals.
walks helpful to do?
Massively,
Yeah.
absolutely massively. Go with a mutual friend of ours, Paul Craig.
Good guy, man.
He'll love he's getting a mention in this, by the way. He will
I love
absolutely love
Paul.
it.
He's a good guy.
I was with him last night. I think we're going to the marathon on the way back, so and obviously I've seen what happened. You know, it's not been easy for anybody, and I've just always wanted to be an ear for someone else. I was like, you know what, I can focus my energies on doing that. You know, just put my
I
mind
think
to it.
now more than ever, it's important that people look out for each other and elevate each other and support one another. We need each other, man.
I know. I know it's went everywhere in the last half hour. So what's sort of going the sort of drug abuse, if you don't mind?
Let's go for it, man.
So that escalated, you know, from weed into coke. How did that all affect you? You know, you had what was going on with your brother, DJing that. How did all that just affect you? Did you end up just totally losing yourself?
Yeah, I got to the point where I was convinced that I was crazy. I was taking.
Yeah,
I mean, I had no idea the severity of the amount of drugs and what the drugs were doing. Now, when anyone starts using anything, whether it's sex or chocolate or gambling or drink or drugs or whatever it is, right? You're getting pleasure out of it. So it's good in the beginning. And there are people that can continue to use it in a way where they can moderate it. But from the very first time I ever had a drink of alcohol, it was never ever in moderation. It was always to the extremes. It was always to change how I feel, take feelings away like trauma and anxiety and fear, and replace them with false feelings of feeling gallus and invincible and feeling great.
yeah,
But for me and for a lot of other addicts, you need more and more drugs. You need stronger and stronger drugs, and it just got to the point where my mental health was completely gone. My behaviour was off the wall. I was suicidal, self-harming. I had thousands and thousands of pounds worth of debt. The violence was happening all the time. The violence was escalating much higher than just scraps in the street. It was now people trying to kill each other. People trying to kill each other over drug deals going wrong, over bumping someone at £100 for a gram of Charlie, a gram of Pure. You know, all that gang rivalry, the tribalism that came along with it. Everything just got more dangerous, and the rest of my life became more reckless as well. You know, sleeping with women that I didn't know very well, unprotected sex, constantly getting into fights at clubs or in my house where I had parties or in the street, having people smash my windows in and kick my doors in, not paying bills, having phones cut off and gas and electric bills coming through the door and council tax arrears and having to leave one address for the other. And I had 3 addresses in 3 years at one point, just running constantly. And it grew and grew and grew, and I always thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. There is no way out of this. And in my early 20s, legitimately thought to myself that the only thing I could look forward to was dying. That the day I died was the most I could hope for in life. That's how quickly addiction consumed me. And I was when I was in that place by my 21st birthday. By my 21st birthday, it was as bad as that. And it wasn't even anywhere near finished yet.
Yeah. I can sort of relate with drugs. I can relate with that. I bother myself. Where nowhere near the extreme. I just needed to went through stuff, and I used it as a runaway.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm gonna feel Cock of the North. You know what I mean? Drinking just. Reading the book, I felt like I can't explain how I felt reading it. It actually helped me so much. Like recognize patterns in myself. Just that same thing when I remember just finishing the book and I was just like, wow, like I thought I knew you in college and I remember messaging you after I finished the book and I was like, I can't even explain how much that's helped me. And I think it was, when did I finish that book? It was October, November. And I remember sort of saying to people, I was like, that's totally changed a lot of outlooks on my thought process on things. Thinking I was weird about things, thinking this, that and the next thing and realise, you know what, it's bloody normal.
Yeah.
Due to what was going on, and I got a lot to thank you for, funnily enough.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Honestly, like, see some of the stuff in the book, I was just like, wow, someone's put this on paper. It's real. Like, what I used to do to help myself is my dad used to always say, just write it down, because at least it's out. And seeing you've done that, I was like, damn you were right. You know, you were right at some of that, just get everything out there.
Helped me massively. Yeah, I mean, when I was really suicidal, when I first started thinking about suicide, I remember it well. I was in high school, and I remember that first time I thinking of it was actually I wondered how do you make a noose. That was the first time I knew I was suicidal, and I was only 14, maybe not even 14. I was very, very young, and one of the outlets that worked for me was writing, and the first influence I ever had was Kurt Cobain, Nirvana. Yeah, I loved the lyrics, I loved the music, and sometimes he wrote from a dark place. And then when Eminem broke onto the scene, that's when I realised you could write about horrific things you felt inside, and there was a way out of that. And so I used to write poetry all the time. And that was my first experience with writing as a way of coping.
Yeah. Did you find it like quite cathartic doing it? You felt you were pouring your heart into
very much, man. Very much. It eased a lot of pain, and I don't even think I realised at the time that that's what I was using it for. I just knew at the time, you know what, I like writing, and if my head got too busy, it was like I'm gonna go write.
Yeah. Like
I've learned is that don't ever relent on that.
No, that's true. I've been sitting talking about doing a podcast for the last 18 months, and then it was just a conversation while I had. She was like, why don't you just go and text folk? You know enough people.
Totally, man.
And I was just like, right, done. She turned around, she was working from home. When I was done, I just turned around, she was like, what are you doing? I was like, I've got 6 people confirmed in like 20 minutes. And like when you messaged me back straight away, I was dancing about the bedroom. If you just look at me, God, what are you doing, boy?
Do what, man? It takes so much courage to actually take something from being an idea to actually trying it, because I mean, I won't talk for anyone else, but for me, my head straight away will tell me you're going to fail, it's going to be shit, no one's going to like it, and you talk yourself out of it before you've even given it a chance. So it's amazing that you're doing this, man.
And sort of my thing for this, right, is fighting adversity, and you're going to chase your dreams. That's sort of my theme, and you're a massive prime example. Hitting rock
Thank you, man.
bottom. Going into rock bottom. What was your rock bottom moment when you're like, I need to snap out of it. Not snap out of it, but I need to, address this and get myself
There was.
going and
I wouldn't say there was just one. I would say there was multiple. For me, anyway, from my own personal experience, there was multiple rock bottoms, but one definitely stands out. And this is after I'd already met you and knew you. This was, I think, in my final year at college. I was in a relationship with someone, and my son was born. And I know now, looking back, why the birth of my son sent me spiraling. At the time, I didn't understand. My son was born, and I still hadn't really pulled away from substance abuse, and I hadn't dealt with all the trauma I had. And I say I hadn't dealt with it. I hadn't dealt with it because there was no help anywhere. There was no real services, so I couldn't really access anything. And when my son was born, I realised there was someone. Thank you, man. I realised at the time that there was someone in this world that I had to love and care for more than myself. And I think I realised at the time I didn't even know how to love myself, and that sent me spiraling. And long story short, I went on a 3-day cocaine binge and ended up standing on a bridge in Ladywell because I decided that it was like this romantic idea in my head: I'm going to go to Ladywell and kill myself. And I just got there. I didn't know what time it was either. I didn't know if it was morning, evening. It was dark, but I didn't know if it was morning time or evening. I had no concept of time. I was so out of it. And I won't go into too much detail, but someone saved my life that night, and they spoke to me about my son. They managed excuse me, to get me talking about my son and about my college, my studies. And they were saying to me, look, you didn't start your studies for no reason. And they asked me, what did you start your studies for? And it was like, in this surreal moment, I was laughing in the middle of the tears, and I was like, I actually started my studies so that I could help someone like I am right now. I wanted to do these studies so that I could help people the way I need help right now. And then the person said to me, they're like, your son needs you, and you can't kill yourself. And I think that was probably, of all the rock bottoms, there's been many, that's the one that stands out the most, just because of all the different factors at play. My son was just born, and I was also homeless at that time. Again, I was staying at someone's house, but I didn't have a house of my own, a home of my own. But I went and got well again, and finished college and graduated and went to uni and got my son back in my life. And that person saved my life, man.
Yeah, I've had a moment like that as well.
Really?
And it wasn't a person, it was a song. It was a line in a song. And I was away, I made my mind up doing this. And one line in a song. You know that feeling, you don't feel like you've laughed for months?
Yeah.
Felt like that. Done everything, right, got to do this. One line in a Jerry Cinnamon song.
What was the line, if you don't mind me asking?
It's from the song Diamonds in the Mud. And
Right.
It's 14 degrees and there's people in the street in the scud. And I bellied myself laughing. Sort of got to where I was going to go, and I was literally just going to jump over.
Oh, man.
And got to the summit before you walk through, and I sat down, and my best mate phoned me. My best mate Craig phoned me, and just like, what's up? He was like, I've not heard from you in a couple of days. I was like, told him, he was like, right, come and meet me. Time to, get this sorted. So I know exactly different, different circumstances, but I know exactly how you feel there.
Someone told me something that is so important, right? They told me that all the bad stuff that I'd gone through, all the suffering I had, even the things I'd done wrong, the pain I caused other people, he told me once I turned my life around, he says none of that would go to waste, that could all be used for good in the future. And I think even what you're doing now with your podcast and sharing your experience will give hope to other people. And it just shows that, mental health and suicide is a serious thing. It kills people. And if we manage to still stick around and tell the story, I think it's important that we tell the story to try and help prevent other people from killing themselves. Because from what it sounds like with you and me, we both might not have even been sitting here talking tonight because we both came close to that.
No, and I think about my partner I've got in my life now. She came to me when I was at my lowest, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Fun enough, a daft match on Tinder on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
Not last year, but the year before, and spiraled to there. And
That's awesome, man.
One thing I do want to ask you about is you speak about this higher power. Fascinates me. You speak about it in the book, and you spoke about it on social media. You just open that up a bit.
Of course, man. So, it's a saying that comes from recovery meetings initially. That's where the saying comes from. And the reason it's called a higher power is because recovery meetings are open to everyone. You don't have to be religious. It doesn't matter what your belief systems are. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter how you identify. Everyone deserves a chance to recover. And the use of the word higher power is to make sure it's accessible to everyone. So to someone, a higher power could be going to the gym. A higher power could be the universe. It could be nature. It could be God. It could be the religion. But it's not one particular thing. For me, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. What I believe in is that there are too many things that have happened in my life now that you can't just explain as a coincidence, because they happen too often in my life, and the timing of them, the way they happen, to me, I believe now these are higher power moments, that there's some kind of, maybe not an intervention, but guidance, right? And I'll give you an example of this. Doing the speaking I'm doing right now, I started doing, before I got a book contract, before any of this stuff happened, I started reading this book called The Secret. And it's all about envisioning positive things happening. And you can do a vision board. And the vision board is basically, you just write down stuff, things, your biggest dreams that you want to happen, but you write them down as if they've already happened, right? So I wrote down on this vision board, I'm a published author. I am a public speaker on addictions. Now I wrote that down about a year and a half ago. Conor McGregor uses these techniques. In the beginning, he used them, right? So I put it on my wall and left it there. And every single day I look at it and it says on there, I'm a public speaker about addiction and I'm a published author. Then I write this book and it got rejected over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where any sane person might have been like, I better give this up because nobody wants it. Now, the reason it was rejected wasn't because the writing was bad, it's because I'm an unknown in the literary world. I didn't have any writing qualifications. I didn't have a social media following. At that time, I wasn't even on social media. I'm not a celebrity. I wrote a book about addiction. I got a review of someone and she said to me, unless you're a celebrity, no one's going to buy your book about addiction. But I'm like, no, man, there's a higher power guiding me. I'm being told that, not being told in the sense that someone's speaking in my ear. It's more like a feeling. I've got this feeling, that I'm going to be a public speaker on addictions and I'm going to be a published author about it. And I've written it on my vision board and my higher power is speaking to me somehow. Anyway, long story short, I got a publisher. My book got published. It's breaking all the barriers. It's been critically acclaimed. And now I'm a public speaker on addiction. Now I've been going into prisons and talking to colleges, and tomorrow I'm a guest lecturer at a college class, and I've been speaking to the new drugs minister for Scotland. I've been involved in a national campaign to tackle the drugs crisis. I've been speaking to the Daily Record and the BBC and etc. And I'm not saying that for ego. That's not to make me sound good. It's not an arrogance. That's what I mean by higher power. how could I have possibly have had a gut feeling about that and written it down like it was like I was a public speaker on addiction without actually getting there? And it was just that feeling. And there was other things that happened, like when I graduated uni, me and my partner started trying for a baby. You know, my son was already here. Me and my partner were trying for a baby. I could not get out of my mind the image of a daughter. And not only that, I had this image in my head that she would be there when I graduated uni, and that this newborn baby girl would be there. And she was actually due to come after graduation, but she came early. And I had these images in my mind before we started trying for a baby. Still have to get pregnant and then have the baby. Yeah, I graduated uni with a baby daughter. She was 3 weeks old. It was, again, I'm not saying it was like, I'm not saying God walked into my living room and asked for a cup of tea and told me. You know, it was just a feeling inside. And more often than not, I can look at my life and I can go all the way back to early days and I can look at things that have happened that have led me to this moment. And I just believe there's some kind of higher power guiding my life, and I believe that it's not exclusive to me. I think this is there for anyone, and you don't even need to call it higher power. Some people just call it tapping into the universe or meditation or whatever. I believe there's something else there, and that if we can take our eyes and mind away from the distraction that's always going on in the world, because the world is always full of distractions, if we can pull ourselves away from those distractions and tap in it, we will find a little bit of guidance. And if we can follow that guidance, it might lead to some spectacular things. And that's what I mean by higher power. I hope that makes sense.
No, I can follow the journey of it. I can't actually follow it.
I mean, like, here's the thing, Andy, right? At one point in my using, I was living on a mattress on a living room floor. All the possessions I had were in a cardboard box, and they weren't very many possessions. I had no money.
Yeah.
I was still involved in violence. I was a full-blown addict. I was suicidal. I'd lost pretty much everything in my life, and there was no way out. There was no way out. Now, I prayed for help, man. That's all I did. I prayed for help, and I'm not saying it was a religious God or a non-religious God or even a God. I just out loud asked for help. And it didn't happen like a bolt of lightning, and you know, the next day I woke up and I had a house and I had money and I had a degree. But it was the beginning of the healing process, because I asked for help, and I've gone from being that guy lying on the mattress, embarrassing myself and hurting everyone around me, to being someone who's now part of a national campaign trying to improve things for addicts in Scotland. I mean, I don't know how else you explain stuff like that in a higher power. That's my personal take.
Exactly. No, completely. I know. Reading the book and I read all your social media in this higher power, and I was like, I've got to ask where that comes from. And yeah, I get that. Yeah, completely get that. People call it a different thing. Conor McGregor's the Mystic Mac. Not anymore, but you know, long enough it was.
I mean, Conor McGregor, right? You can find videos of him when he's just a young, pimple-faced guy, and he's getting interviewed, and he's on welfare. He's in Dublin. He's got next to nothing, and you can find these videos on YouTube, and he's getting interviewed, and he's telling the interviewer, he's like, "I will be the UFC champion, like without doubt." And it wasn't an arrogance. What he said was, you have to believe in yourself to the point that other people think you're crazy. And that's why whenever someone rejected me for my book idea, I was like, it's going to happen, because like something is speaking to me, something is telling me, because I'm now listening. When I'm using drugs or I'm chasing after things that are no good, I'm no longer listening. Mm-hmm. But when I'm away from that and I'm tuned in to something else, whatever you want to call it, and I'm listening, the signs will be there, and you just kind of just need to follow the signs. It's like something was telling you to do a podcast, and you're doing it.
I think, I've got, my, like yourself, I've got like my podcast and people I watch, James English, Joe Rogan, The True Geordie, Open Goal, Football One, and I just look and go, I just think they're no different from me. They all came from nothing, so why can I not go get it? And
I think they're all great examples.
Especially Brian the True Geordie, he was broke. He was doing videos on. He was an iPhone on a iron board, and I just look at what he's got and I'm like, wow, I want that. I'm having it.
You know what? You should write down, I mean, this is just my opinion. I would write it down as if it's already happened and it's just a destination that's waiting for you to arrive.
Like, having the conversations with people like, right, you're starting a podcast, where do you want to go with it? And I was like, I've got those goals in here. No one needs to know them. But I'm time to shoot for the stars.
100%.
I mean, you only need to look at the guy over my shoulder.
I noticed that, man. I noticed it. You know what though? There's something about people that come from a working class background that aren't any perfect human beings that is quite appealing. And I think that it's always great to see a success story when someone's come from a background where it's not been easy for them and they've maybe even made some bad mistakes and done things they shouldn't have, but they've turned it around. Because
I was talking to somebody before I started the podcast. Guy who's got the Oasis podcast, James, and he says, "What should I do for the podcast?" Like, because you're going to need to have a specific theme in it. And I thought, invaluable. And literally, before I write down notes, I write down that and just build on it. And I'm like, right, if I didn't get through all the points, I'm going to cover it. Just build everything now. That's like spider diagram. You just go like that. I'll get through it. And if I don't get it in one podcast, you know what? I'll do part 2.
Yeah, definitely, man.
I look at with that, my first podcast, guest Darren. That's got a part 2 to it coming.
That's awesome.
Spoke a good bit about your book. How did that all come about? And where did the name Euphoric Recall from?
So again, we're coming back to higher power moment, right? Because I had graduated uni in 2017. I was 2.5 years clean from substances. I was in recovery, had my 2 kids and my partner, and we lived in a nice house and all that stuff. Had all the outward stuff. I stopped going to my recovery meetings that had helped me get clean. And I got arrogant and I got complacent and I took my recovery for granted. And then I relapsed. I relapsed on New Year's Eve. And the relapse took me 6 months to come back from. I got back and I got humble again and I got clean. And then someone in my family died and I wrote the eulogy for the funeral. And when I was helping to carry that family member in the coffin to their final resting place, and I stood up and done the eulogy, I swear to God, this is how it really came about. I done the eulogy, I stepped off the podium, and I just got this feeling inside that said, write a book. And that's the story behind it. I just got a feeling. It wasn't words, it wasn't like the family member whispering in my ear. It was just simply a feeling inside that was like, write a book. I went home, started to write it, and then I just kept going. And then once I'd written, this manuscript, this full manuscript, I then had to learn what I was doing as far as how do you get that out there. And I was going through the process of trial and error and getting rejected from people. And you have to understand that with publishers and agents, they get thousands of these all the time. And usually you have to be well known before you get heard by a big publisher, a really well known one. And eventually 1 or 2 publishers actually started getting interested in it. But that was after a lot of time chipping away at it and a lot of rejections and a lot of people telling me it would never happen. But it did, and I got the contract. The name Euphoric Recall is a saying from the recovery scene. It kind of means when you look back on your using, your drinking, drugs, or traumatic times, you look back on it with a sense of nostalgia, even though it was a traumatic and brutal time. And there's there's a bit in the book where I use the words euphoric recall, and
Yeah.
the book was originally called something else, and then my publisher said to me, the title's not working, and she said, but the title will be in your book somewhere. She said, read it again. She says the title is going to be in there somewhere. And when I got to chapter 3, where that's, I think it's chapter 3 where I say that saying, and the sentence, so the sentence is something like, blah blah blah. This gives me a euphoric recall, and I'm like, euphoric recall. It kind of makes sense. The whole story is about looking back with nostalgia, even though a lot of the story is about going through trauma. And so it just stood out. And I said to my publisher, "What about euphoric recall?" And then she loved it, and I loved it, and it just seems like such a perfect fit now.
Yeah, I can't imagine anything being on top of that book. Give me 2 seconds, I'll get out of coffee.
No hassle.
And here we are.
Yeah, man.
For anyone who's going to buy it, Amazon, and I actually got through a publishing company. That's publishing. I followed the link, and can't look at it without seeing your good friend's artwork on it.
Yeah, Martin.
Unbelievable artwork on that. I just look at it and go, seeing his work and knowing about his work anyway, I just look and go, that's, it's quite iconic.
You want to talk about higher powers, right? We grew up in the same street. His house and mine were just opposite each other. We played football together and all that as kids, and then we lost touch for a few years when I was away in my addiction, and then we came back together as adults. Mm-hmm. By the time I had a publisher, Mark had just started doing art. He is a musician, but he just started. He was literally just starting out at the same time as I got the contract, and I needed a front cover to visualize before the contract. And so I contacted him and said, look, I'm trying to get this book out there. I'm trying to get a contract. I need something to visualize. So I asked him to do me the front cover just as a favor, not the real front cover. It was just to be something for me to visualize. And he's like, he says, send me the book so I can read it, so I can visualize what kind of cover. And he read it. And he done about 100 sketches, right? That was the first one he done. And he sent it to me. And I said to him instantly, I was like, holy shit, mate, this isn't even just something for me to visualize. This is the front cover. I was blown away by it.
Okay, I get it. Even looking at it after reading it, I get it.
Yeah. It just works.
Yeah. No, it just totally does. So you've got another. You're working on another book.
Yeah, man. So I've written, I'd say, more than 2/3 of it now. It's called Where the Fuck is Phil, and it's different to my first book in the sense. It's different from the first book. It's about growing up in West Lothian in the early 2000s. It's about lad culture and masculinity and what we thought it was and what we thought it meant, and the violence and the drugs and the women. But because I'd say it's about 50% memoir and 50% fiction. I've made it a fiction because I want to play around with storyline. In my first book, it was all 100% true, what really happened in my life.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so this one's going to be a bit more playful, a bit more outlandish with characters, but every single character is based on someone I knew and grew up with. It's just like I've magnified them a little bit more.
Yeah, add arms and legs onto them.
Yeah, I've taken influence from people like Quentin Tarantino and tried to just make it a bit of an entertaining read. It's not going to be full of the kind of trauma my book was, but it certainly will look at the reasons why lads at that time ended up in that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I'm
hoping to get it out there this year, man. I'm still working hard on it, so I'm hoping to get it out there this year.
Brilliant, man. absolutely brilliant. I'd actually wrote the notes before you done your work. But I knew about your work being on BBC Radio and all that. How did that all come about? Doing all the work about the drug campaign and the
You know,
problems we've got in this country.
yeah, I can't remember what the first thing was, but basically once the book got out and I started doing a few talks to promote the book, I was talking about my personal experience, and then people started asking me to speak at events about what led me to substance abuse. And I work in addiction in West Lothian as well, so it's not just lived experience, it's my profession, it's what I went and got qualified doing. And I've got a lot of different angles for the conversation. And then one talk just led to another, and then I got invited to this big event about raising awareness over the drugs death crisis because the new figures were coming out. And I spoke at that event, and it kind of just catapulted me into the politics of it all. And then suddenly I'm talking to all these different media outlets, and I became an activist and a campaigner and started campaigning for change and using, because I all of a sudden had a voice and I had a bit of a platform. And there's loads of people out there doing this. I'm not the only one, there's lots of us, but my voice is one of the voices that's being used. And so I've been involved in a lot of meetings with, Angela Constance and other people who are part of the new attempt at solving the problem. And if I can contribute in some small way, then that's good.
Yeah, because it's all over the news now. The way I got to know about it is James English is homeless, and seeing it, and I was like, I've walked those streets at night, and I've fought different stuff, and it wasn't until last year, so this time last year, I was staying over at a hotel in Glasgow, and I was going through, you come down the back of Glasgow Central, and you're under the tracks, and just start speaking to people. I'm just like, you alright? And just talking away, and I was just like, just blew my mind. I was like, somebody needs to do something about this because the homeless epidemic and drug epidemic, they're quite like that.
Yeah, I mean, even the suicide rates as well. I mean, it can't be a coincidence in Scotland that these things are all happening at the same time. There's a problem here. There's a problem in this country.
No, 100%. Where do you see all that going? I know that there's been an announcement of 250 million or something going into it.
Yeah, the reaction from the Scottish government's been a good one, but it is early days and we've yet to see how that's all going to play out. So at this early stage, I'm happy. As far as where it all goes, I honestly couldn't predict it. I feel much more optimistic and hopeful today than I did 2 weeks ago because of the reaction from the Scottish government. But there's so many other things going on: Brexit, coronavirus, Scotland trying to get independence and being at war with Westminster all the time. There are all these other factors that are constantly in play and intertwining with each other. So who knows where it all goes, man? But we shall see.
So basically, then what's in the future then? Where's this everything going?
So I'm finishing I'm finishing my social work master's degree in the summer. That'll hopefully be finished, and I'm hoping within a year's time I can be doing writing and speaking as my either full time or a big part of my professional work. Again, it's early days with that, and I just take it one day at a time. But ideally, for me, becoming a full time writer and speaker and living that way would be what I would hope for.
Brilliant, man. Absolutely brilliant. I think that'll be us.
Cool, man.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Honestly, I just thought, imagine I got Aidan on and then spoke to friends of mine, like, he'll do it.
Yeah, of course.
Spoke to Paul, and I know you'd actually seen Paul a couple of days before. I said to him, I'll speak to Aidan, he'll do it. That'll be amazing, use your old friends and
Yeah.
Just get everything.
I know, man. I feel it's nice that we've come full circle, and it's like 10 years since we met, man.
100%. It's like 10 years things like, everything. It's like a 10-year cycle.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned something like that in your book. Things like the cycles and that. It's not your book. It's something else I'm reading because this set me off in reading things now. So.
Yeah, man. Read as much as you can. It's been such a great thing for me. I read as often as I can. I read lots of different types of books.
Yeah. So what I'll do, Aidan, where can everyone find you? Social media and...
Yeah, at Aidan Author on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, and obviously the book, Euphoric Recall, you can get on Amazon from Guts Publishing. You can Google it and it's on iTunes and Apple and all these other places for ebook, and the audio book's coming out very, very soon.
Yeah, I was about to say, you sorted that all?
Yeah, we had lots of problems because of COVID, as far as getting into the studio and finishing recording. And recording an audiobook is very, very difficult because you have to go in and re-record parts. And so the virus delayed it a lot. So we're hoping any day now to get an announcement to say it's out there. I think it's possibly out there already, but for it to become out on Audible and all that, the main places will announce that very soon.
What I'll do is, I'll stick everything in the description, all that, where to find you, your book, and the publishing deals. And
Cool,
thank you
man.
very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, man. Cheers, man.